And please stay tuned, don't go away, because we're gonna have one more talk about current status and future prospects in online. And from Professor Lee in UNIST, he is currently in Graduate School of Creative Design Engineering here at UNIST. He holds a PhD from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and today he will share his teaching experience of blended learning model at UIUC. Professor Lee, will you go ahead, start?
Thank you very much for having me to this meaningful event. I'd like to talk about lessons learned in blended learning at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign campus, focused on a case study of iSchool MSIM program. So my name is KyunghoLee, and I'm an assistant professor at UNIST Design. So here's my table of contents. Today I'm gonna roughly deliver 4 elements through this presentation. First of all, I'd like to start with a brief overview of iSchool at UIUC system for those who are not familiar with the name. And then I explain a working definition of blended learning. And I'd like to talk about importance of blended learning with Generation Z. And then I will continue to focus on areas to consider for better blended learning, and then actually what kind of things will be happening around the physical and virtual classroom blended learning around UIUC iSchool system. And then I'd like to end with my presentation with a brief summary. So please note that today's presentation was based on my past experience, and this presentation does not purport to reflect the official opinion or views of the UIUC iSchool or its members. So, what is iSchool at UIUC? It was founded in 1893, and then it is also considered one of the oldest LIS, Library Information Science doctoral program in the United States since 1948. It is also considered #1 ranked LIS program in the country, and it is also well known for its pioneer and award-winning online education over 20 years. All the faculty members and staffs at iSchool UIUC, they strive to embrace and encourage interdisciplinary, and their core principle is information organization, accessibility, and the use of preservation to meet the needs of the information society and the world. So as you see, there are a beautiful building on the right top picture, and the right bottom picture represent how the usual class would go. So, what is blended learning? I'd like to explain briefly about working definition of blended learning. It is an approach to learning that combines face-to-face and online learning experiences, as you see on the right illustration. Ideally, each component will complement the other by using its particular strengths. So blended learning can be viewed as a symbolic of the gap between traditional classroom education and totally connected digital learning or e-learning. So roughly, we can define 4 different core elements in blended learning, as you see in the right picture: content, delivery, and learning experience and instructions. The first one, the content, is about course structure and materials that eventually allows a self-paced learning. And the second item is delivery. It means activities and events happened in and out of the physical and digital classroom, and that will enable a student-tailored learning. And the third one is on-offline collaborative learning culture that facilitates a supportive competition in a nice and gentle way. And the last one is obviously instruction and advice. Maybe face-to-face training or mentoring is good, but also we can use various technology to support and to spark one's curiosity and keep them enhance their intrinsic motivation toward research or maybe toward industry goal. So why does blended learning in these days matter? So basically our education system was established during the era of information scarcity, so-called from baby boomer generation to Generation X. And then we now live in an age of information abundance, ranging from Generation Y, also known as Millennium generation, and to Generation G. And let's imagine that if you were starting from scratch, would you design our future education system just to be based on a lecture discussion in this rapidly changing or even changed context? The overall societal context and human student behavior and consumption trends is totally changed. Then would it be instead of for transformative learning experience with all the changes? I'm having some delay. Yes. There are roughly 4 different items to consider to facilitate better blended learning: student, content, delivery, and learning experience. First of all, students, they are different. They are totally different species in these days. For example, today's undergrad and even grad student, mostly born after 1990, and they are also known as digital natives, while we are considered as digital immigrant. They grew up with graphical web, modern browsers, and they are live with the data-on-demand culture. And new undergrad, ranging from 15 to 18 years old, they are even more different because Generation G grew up with 24/7 Wi-Fi access and social media influence, everything on YouTube, and they are like feeling globally connected and awareness about global issues like global warming and microplastic pollution, sort of things. So also, contents are being evolved. Our future student, number one fear is about not getting a job that matches my personality, and they expect that they will work in many different jobs over their career. So students have become more aware of rising education costs, rethinking the course model and pedagogy and online learning contents of their interest. So better educational content and open courseware are virtually everywhere. It means that they voluntarily seek and take new courses during their undergrad or grad programs to get more certificates and experiences to related area. For example, the right top picture illustrates a very interesting online education platform. And if students go and complete every single lecture and assignment, they will get some certificate, as we can see in bottom right picture. So delivery channels, they are diversified, meaning that content delivery channels are even more diversified to take advantage of technology to personalize the educational experience, meaning that, as you can see in the right picture, nowadays many people wanted to use a Blackboard, Zoom, or Moodle system to get connected, and they also engage it with class with any possible channel. For example, desktop, laptop, or tablet computing, or even mobile phones. And the various teaching method and philosophy has been introduced with the emergence of different channels like active learning, project-based learning, peer learning, and it will now make it possible a student-tailored learning method. Then, what's the role and responsibility of school? School experiences are also changed. The meaning of the residential experience in undergrad or grad program is still important, as students today are identified as lacking resilience. So incorporating such an resilience training into blended learning is still challenging, but they should be a good way to accommodate better acquiring knowledge, skill set within discipline, major, or even across the disciplines. So here's our student general expectation, and this was found by the UIUC, a recent education transformative learning experiences initiative. They seek affordability, meaning that the overall cost, time, and energy, and they also seek for some interesting academic support. And then they also become more aware of their mental health and wellness problem, and then they consider in more aggressive ways in credentials and accessibility. And they seek some interesting, exotic international experience, and also they do care about design initiative and creative culture around their coursework or their major. So then what kind of things can be happened in and out of the class? I mean physical classroom or virtual classroom. So I'd like to talk a little more about blended learning at UIUC case. The program aims to provide high-touch, high-tech, high-impact education experience, and the interactive online learning environment will allow students to be fully engaged, collaborating with faculty and the other student in real time in a virtual classroom. And this sentence include listen to engage in live lectures if they are in the same time zone, and participate in discussions through the use of microphone and live chat, and to collaborate in a small group activities, and they actually get a chance to present their work through the education management system, and they also get a chance to present project or hear from guest speakers. So in order to create a blended learning courses, we need to go through several steps. The first of all, we need to have instructor. He will supervise the entire process, and then he initiate some course. And then the course obviously includes some syllabus, materials, and structure, and then e-learning specialists come into play to support development of course materials in a proper format according to the LMS system. And then teaching assistant support the course management and assessment of each student. And of course, there will be a student and the education management system such as Moodle or Blackboard will be there as well. So in my case, we put our emphasis, content, delivery, and assessment. I'd like to explain one thing at a time. So using Blackboard Ultra Collaborate system, we provided live lecture discussion session as well as recorded video clips on each class, as you can see on right picture. So we designed, transformed every single weekly lecture, assignment, and task electronically, and then we provide that actual classroom experience with some sort of YouTube clips like. And then we facilitate both a better presence of an instructor and classroom culture and student self-paced learning, meaning that if one can get a good sense of some topic or issue, she and he can go over and over and over until he can fully understand about the content. The second thing is delivery. We also focused on delivery to expand for personalized learning. With the carefully designed activities and event, we enabled a student-tailored learning. We provided mandatory readings and assignment, but also optional materials and topics to explore more on with a different deadline. So students can maintain on the optimal level of boredom and engagement, meaning that they don't get too much stressed. So by doing so, we successfully stimulated students' intellectual curiosity and led them to further directions of their interest. As you can see on the right picture, there are some tasks and assignment, and obviously there are different deadlines. If they accomplish more, and they probably get more or higher grade in assessment phase. So collaborative learning culture is important. So we put our emphasis on cultivating seamless collaborative learning culture regardless of participating method. Whether they are in physical classroom or virtual classroom, they'll be the same. We gently lead students, have a supportive competition between groups, especially during the small group activity, so they can build a more strong team spirit between the students. And it turns out it's a very effective technique for us to facilitate that kind of interesting culture between on offline students. So the last one is assessment and feedback. It's kind of important thing, maybe one of the most important thing in blended learning. We carefully assessed student progress qualitatively as well as quantitatively on a weekly basis. As you can see on the right picture, we always evaluate, assess the overall accomplishment in the class from student A to Z, and then we also care about the overall distribution of grade to find whether we are on the right track or not in terms of managing the overall difficulty and pace of the class. So in each assessment, assignment, and after major exams, we provided detailed feedbacks as much as we could. For example, the picture on the right bottom is the feedback that I wrote to the student. Their assignment appeared on the left-hand side, and then I used a tablet to provide better method to resolve the issue the student had at that time. So by doing so, we believe that we kept sparking one's curiosity and to enhance one's intrinsic motivation, avoiding the feelings of being disconnected or alienated from physical class. So this is a typical physical classroom at iSchool, UIUC, and there'll be an e-learning specialist, and there's also webcam, and I'm preparing the class like 5 minutes before the class. And then during the class, there'll be a virtual classroom. There are only 8 students in the physical classroom, and over 20 students are participating from a virtual classroom using Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. And then after that, while they are presenting their work, students in a physical classroom or virtual classroom, they can engage with any types of student. So maybe you might want to find a more aggressive or audacious method to provide better blended learning. One typical problem with traditional teaching method is that we position our students as outsiders. Just come into this lab and let me show you how things work. But nowadays, students, they are different, so we need to change ourselves as well. So maybe you might want to think about using digital devices in a more aggressive way, or maybe you can think of creating better computer simulations or immersive technologies so that we can provide better learning experience. There is emerging concept like using embodiment and something like that. So I'd like to summarize this presentation, and I'd like to give you some takeaway for better blended learning. For our future students come from Generation Z, we need to think about 4 different elements: content, delivery, learning experience, and instruction. Content should be designed to allow students a self-paced learning, and activities and events happened in classroom that should be enabling a student-tailored learning, and also on-offline collaborative culture and learning experience is important. Maybe we could facilitate a supportive competition in both in or between physical or digital classroom. Lastly, as an instructor, we always need to find better way to creating presence, and then better way to provide mentoring and feedback so that we can catch up with the various needs and wants of students from Generation G. And that's all. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any question, please feel free to ask me. Thank you again.